Well, welcome back, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Phelan, and I am a gambling counselor here at Nicasa Behavioral Health Services. We have been providing behavioral health and social health services in Lake County since 1966, and we're very grateful to be a gambling service provider as well through Super for the past 20 years. So I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker for this session. Dan Trolaro is the VP of Prevention, US for Epic Risk Management. He graduated from the College of New Jersey with a major in finance and a concentration in economics and spent 12 years in the world of investment banking. Despite a successful career, Dan had also been suffering in silence with a gambling disorder since high school. In 2013, and after a series of life events, he went on to receive his master's in psychology in order to help educate others around the country on prevention, education, and emerging trends in the world of gambling. Dan welcomes questions and comments throughout his presentation today, so please use the Q&A box and your submissions will be brought into the discussion throughout. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Liz, thank you so much. Good to see you. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So if any of you, many of you, I'm sure, hopefully all of you, were on the opening address yesterday, I have changed location. I'm now sitting in Omaha, Nebraska. So I'm in the same time zone, which is convenient, but also I had to double check and make sure that my 1 hour time difference wasn't mixing up my scheduled appearance. And also my hair is a little shorter, had to get a little bit of a haircut. So I'm going to share my screen. It's good to be back with you today as we talk about sports betting, emerging trends, and a little look at prevention. The work that I'm privileged to do with Epic Risk Management is work in the area of prevention. Ideally, we always try for primary prevention, but it's not always easy to do, especially because many of our populations that we serve have probably been gambling for a really long time before this became a really pressing topic. So primary prevention has to start early, right? We have to get to the little kids, we have to get into school. And I am thankful to see that at least one state is looking at this, and that's Virginia, which recently just, I believe, passed legislation. I know it was pending, but I believe it was passed to provide a gambling education in the K through 12. I think that's a win. I think we need to see more states following suit, either proposing that bill, that legislation, and getting gambling education in the curriculum in K through 12. And it goes to Jody's point. Jody did a great job, as she always did, talking about financial literacy and education, because we know gambling disorder is an emotional disorder with financial consequences. And when you're risking something of value, it can be cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, it could be money, it could be items that contain value like digital tokens and NFTs. We need to have education around the risks, the rewards, and establishing a proper relationship with money, because the gambler's view of money oftentimes is not the same as the non-gambler, as we know, and they don't have a healthy relationship. But in recovery, they need to reestablish those relationships, both with people and with their finances. So Jody does a great job, as always, and it's a privilege to just have the opportunity to know her and be a partner with her in this field as we move forward. So for the next, let's say 55 minutes, we're going to take a look at the big elephant in the room, sports betting. Sports betting, as we know, PASPA was repealed in 2018, which essentially allowed for each state to decide how to offer sports betting, if they wanted to offer sports betting, how to regulate it, how to enforce it, how to legislate it, and what kind of parameters would be in place. So as we look through, there's a couple of emerging trends we need to talk about. We need to look at what the nature of sports betting looks like today. This can be a 10-hour topic. So we have to cram a lot of information into about 50 minutes. So I'm only going to touch on the high level points. I've done trainings on sports betting, emerging trends, the psychology of sports betting and gambling, the use of technology, because the sports bettor today is different than the traditional bettor of 20, 30 years ago. It's no longer essentially the outcome of the game that matters, but rather it's in-game performance. It's micro betting, micro transactions, which are normalized in today's youth through the spending of money on video games. If you think about it, if we take a look back and we think about how people spend their time, if they're playing games on their phones, on their mobile device, on their smartphone, and you get this little option on your screen that says, oh, for 99 cents, you can buy a cool little outfit, or you can buy a cool weapon, or you can do something to enhance your experience, more coins. It's a micro transaction. It's the normalization of spend. And that happens at an early age. I will share with you that when I was on a flight, ironically, to Chicago a number of years ago, and forgive me, I have some allergies today as well, so I have my tissues nearby. I was sitting next to a young person and his mom, and kid, a young guy, maybe like 6 years old, and he's playing his mom's phone to stay quiet on the plane. And he's playing a game, and the little option comes up to make a purchase. And the mom looks over and says, "You know what to do there. Hit the X. We don't make little purchases. We don't spend mommy's money." All right, that was good. But then there was an image of a young boy crying. And the message underneath said, "I'm sorry you don't want to be awesome today." Now, that doesn't show up on the bank statement. But when that 6-year-old is old enough to understand really what that means, and based on what's going on in his life, he might want to be awesome. And so those messages, as we see things, are starting to create issues for people using technology, playing games, and spending. So what are some of the emerging trends in sports gambling that we need to be aware of? Well, number one, sports gambling is sweeping the country. And as I mentioned before, it's the in-play betting. It's the micro betting. That's gaining popularity. It's the ability to say what will happen in the next 5 minutes of a game, what will happen in the next quarter. In some cases, what will happen in the next pitch, the next at bat. Baseball season's right around the corner. So it's the micro betting that starts to pick up speed. There's also something called jock market. Jock market combines the stock market with daily fantasy sports contests. So imagine logging on to a website where you're able to spend money and draft players, and you assemble a team just like daily fantasy sports contests. However, based upon how they perform, the value of that player's price goes up or down. So if you buy Tom Brady for $9 a share and he has a good game on a Sunday, his price might go up to $14 or $15 a share. You can turn around and sell that. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to have a sneeze. Hold on 1 second. I apologize. Thank you. Sorry about that. I want to keep everyone away from my sneezes. Anyone that's ever known me in my life knows that my sneezes are very loud and can be quite frightening. So jock market takes that experience and allows you to combine the stock market, buying and selling players. If Tom Brady's having a good game, you can sell him at his high and then buy another player. So it's changing the landscape of how we treat the investment world with the sports world. And we've seen this time and time again. That's why it's so important as clinicians, as preventionists, that if you have people in recovery from drug and alcohol, if you have people in recovery that are starting to day trade or play the market, the day traders tend to also like to bet on sports. Sports gamblers tend to like to day trade. So there's connected behaviors. It's the speed, the reinforcement, the thought that one skill will matter and help to predict the outcome or performance. It's the research. Both have research, strong amounts of research components. So that's why we start to see the overlap. It's that skill base. Prop betting on the player performance or events like a coin toss, that's emerging. Kevin Durant a couple of weeks ago from the Brooklyn Nets said, it's in an interview locally, says it's nice knowing that I have power over someone's bet. Because if someone bets on me to have more than 12 rebounds, whatever he said, I like to know that I have power over that. Now that's interesting. When a player starts to know if people are betting on him or her and they have power over that bet and the outcome of that bet, that can be quite concerning as well. Player tracking technology is another emerging trend in sports betting, because what you're starting to see are the apparel companies, the Reeboks, the Nikes, the Adidas, the Under Armours, putting chips and sensors in clothing to detect hydration and sweat and perspiration levels and all of these things, so that any amount of data or information can be fueled and funneled back to the gambler. The person who's placing bets wants any amount of information, any little piece of information can be the edge that they look for. I shared with you yesterday on the keynote that I'm a gambler in recovery over 12 years now, but when I was gambling, I would watch the Weather Channel at 5 o'clock during the week because I wanted to see what was going on. Is the wind blowing out at Wrigley? If the wind is blowing out to right field, well, then I think there's gonna be a lot of home runs hit. I might bet the over in that game. I was always looking for that edge or that angle. I wanted that information. So that's why data, statistics, technology as it evolves, sensors in clothing, sensors in the uniforms, in the ball, in the hockey puck, it all matters. It's all fueled and funneled back for stats data, ultimately to set a line so that somebody can bet on it. And then therefore there's money involved. Esports betting is growing on college campuses around the country. We'll be at Creighton University this afternoon, and many college campuses. I'm not sure if Creighton has one here in Nebraska, but I know Akron does when we were in Ohio. And many colleges are having esports. They're not NCAA sanctioned, but these are teams of individuals competing not on the field, but in front of the computer screen on a video game. Like Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, Madden, any popular video games, Fortnite. And so these college kids are competing for prizes, for trophy. And therefore, if there's a college that offers esports, and some of them offer scholarships, that means at the high school level, esports teams are being formed. And one of the concerns in the esports world is, one, the mental health aspect. We've seen a number of esport athletes starting to step back and focus on their mental health. Thankfully, that's gaining good attention. But also there's a high level of side betting that occurs in that environment. We know certain sports tend to lend itself to more gambling than others. Golf has a high amount of side betting that goes on, hole by hole between players. Esports is another one that has a culture of side betting. And lastly, you have NFTs, non-fungible tokens. That's a whole nother hour session, but I just want to highlight, these are digital assets which represent real world items. So if you've always wanted to own Picasso, you just own it as an NFT. You pay less money for it, you own a piece of it, and now you have this virtual digital item in your library that you own. You pay good money for it. What's the true value though? It's based on supply and demand. It's the next hot thing right now. So right now the value is great. I remember going to Yankee Stadium, Mariano Rivera, one of their closers, Hall of Fame closer, when he retired. The year he retired, or the year after, they had like a bobblehead night. Mariano Rivera bobblehead. Everyone wanted the bobblehead. So I went, I was married at the time, picked up one for me, one for my wife, and then we ended up getting two others that people left behind. So I had four of them. On eBay the next day, those things were selling for $150 each. I quickly unloaded three of them because there's no market for this. It was just strike while the iron's hot. I'm going to sell it today. I looked on eBay like a month, 2 months later, they were down for like $25. And so I made a quick sale because I saw this thing that was hot at the time. Don't miss out. Want that next great thing. Let me go ahead and sell it quickly. Unfortunately, during my gambling days, that was often my thinking, was to get rich quick. And that's one of those relationships with money and finances that tends to evolve over time in terms of the mindset. So NFTs, it's another whole world where people at DraftKings has them. You can go to DraftKings app and they have a whole NFT marketplace. So it's definitely an emerging trend. So as we move through today, we have to understand, and we know gambling is a hidden addiction. It's hard to diagnose and it's hard to overcome for the person who gambles because they think they're going to win on the next bet. If anyone on here has ever gambled, you've been conditioned to know that you will win every so often. The problem is you don't know how much, how often, or when it will occur next. And so that intermittent reward is difficult to abandon. It really is, because it feels good. It feels good when you win, but it also feels good when you're playing, and it feels good when you're thinking about it. So it's not just the winning that matters. It's the anticipation and the participation. Take a look at this BBC News. This is the one I referenced yesterday, I believe. It's a 4-minute video where they put someone who gambles, a person with a gambling problem, inside an MRI scanning machine to take a look about what's happening with the person's brain and what are some conclusions that are drawn. And again, as always, please feel free to put into the chat any comments or observations. And then after this, we'll continue moving on. Enjoy the video.
It's getting me excited already. we arranged for gambler Tony Franklin to join a unique experiment by one of the world's leading experts on addiction, Professor David Nutt.
Gambling addiction is not a failure of will. It is a brain disorder which is preyed upon by the gambling industry.
Honestly, I can feel my heartbeat just rising, just looking at the damn thing.
Once you become addicted, it's very, very hard to stop because you've changed your brain. Addiction is a brain that has changed to become entrained to the desires of the gambling.
So we're going to start the roulette task, Tony.
This will be the first time anyone plays something similar to a fixed odds betting terminal from inside an MRI scanner. The professor says it will reveal what's happening in Tony's brain as he uses a keypad to bet.
Got £1,000 to spend. Can I spend it all on the first spin?
When Tony is doing his task, when he's looking at the roulette wheel and he's making a decision to bet, parts of the brain get turned on and then they can't stop. And we think there's probably a chemical basis to that. So that's what we're expecting to see, that the habit centers are overactivated in people with gambling compared with normal people like us. The brain's not very active. Maybe a little bit here, he's thinking at what shall I do? But it's pretty calm. Contrast that with what happens in the next one. And
that's a huge difference from
indeed
there to there.
Exactly.
So that's in a matter of seconds as well, would it be?
Exactly.
Or?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So here we see the visual system, the back of the brain here, intensely activated. He's watching really closely. He wants that ball bearing to come down on his color. And now we look at the emotional regions, and these are different regions activated. This is the anterior cingulate cortex, this is the insular, and these are the two areas of the brain which make sense of emotions. They may generate the emotion he's feeling of excitement. Will I win? Won't I win? And here we see a very similar picture. In fact, the only real difference between winning and anticipating is this area here. And this is an area where I think we see the sense of satisfaction. Yeah, I've won. That's good. Register that. Start again. Or winning and waiting to see if you've won, the anticipation, they're both pretty much the same. And that's a really key point about gambling. It's not just the winning that counts. It's the taking part, and the taking part repeatedly when you don't win is as activating to a gambler as the winning. When you're sitting in a fixed odd terminal, you're getting this every 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So you can have hundreds of them. And so that process can become, in the end, it becomes kind of habitual, it becomes addictive.
So that's the key takeaway, right? It's not just the winning that matters. It's the taking part and the taking part repeatedly. And I can't help but think about that as we see emerging trends in gambling and sports betting and internet wagering that's sweeping the nation. It's the rapid reinforcement. It's the concept that I can now play a hand of blackjack on my phone in my pocket every 5 seconds. I can bet on sporting events where the outcome no longer matters, but I can just bet on the next play that's reinforced every 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I can bet on the next match in tennis. And so when we start thinking about that, how do we need to start changing our prevention strategies? How do we need to start changing our education around these types of activities that are reinforced rapidly? It's that concept of immediate gratification versus delay of gratification. We're going back to the marshmallow test from the 60s, where they would give young people the one marshmallow and say, hey, listen, here's one marshmallow. You can either eat it now or wait a few minutes. And if you wait a few minutes, we'll give you 2 later on. And when you look at the study, you can see, and there was a video I've shown in the past, shows these little young people struggling. And as they were younger and younger, the ability to control oneself obviously is more difficult, as we know. So I just can't help but think that's where we're going to. Just think even about in society, we think about Amazon, right? In the old days, we used to send away for shipping, right? Remember the SACE, the self-addressed stamped envelope. Send a self-addressed stamped envelope with, and wait 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. Could you imagine waiting 6 to 8 weeks for delivery? It's going to be out of stock. It's going to be out of style. It's not going to be technologically relevant anymore. And I don't want to wait that long. I want 2-day shipping. And we're even getting to the point where 2-day shipping for some people becomes too long. I need to have it same day or 1 day. So we're shortening that reward schedule, and it's happening across all different forms of gambling and culture. Specific to gambling, the lottery used to be the weekly lottery. Then it was the nightly lottery. Then it was the twice-a-day lottery. Now it's instant scratch-offs. It's lottery contests in bars where you get a new outcome every 4 or 5 minutes. Keno. So we're shortening the reward schedule. The stock market, investing, buy and hold long-term. Now it's day trading, scalping, short-term transactions, shortening the reward schedule. Fantasy sports used to be season long. Draft a team. You have that team for 17 weeks. You make a few trades here and there, but that's your team, and you try to win a trophy at the end of the football season. Now it's daily fantasy sports. Draft a new team every day for hopes to win prizes. Shortening the reward schedule. So what are the reasons for disordered gambling? Highlighted yesterday that gambling may not be the problem. Gambling might be the solution to a deeper issue. It could be to escape day-to-day problems and stress. Gambling becomes your coping mechanism. Gambling becomes the thing that says, I don't want to deal with this now, so I'm just going to gamble for a little while. I remember after September 11th, when I lost 14 friends and I had lost 2 more to suicide in the weeks that followed. I remember waking up the day after September 11th, and I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I don't feel like crying anymore. I don't feel like thinking. I don't feel like watching the news, and I really don't know what to do. So I'm just going to log on the internet. I put $100 into a Bodog account, which is now Bovada, and it was illegal at the time, but I didn't care. And I remember putting that $100 in and playing blackjack for about 45 minutes online. That's all. 45 minutes, $100 wasn't an issue. But the problem was that's what I chose to use as my escape. And then I did that the next day and the next day. And that's how the story goes. So sometimes we do it to avoid problems and stress. But it can also be a way to cope with depression, anxiety, or trauma. Or maybe the gambling brings on depression, anxiety, and stresses and leads to traumatic activity and events. We don't know the chicken or the egg. And is it important to talk about which one comes first? Yes, but it's also important to realize that they're connected, right? How are we using, what's your relationship with gambling? Why do you use gambling to solve these issues? What other life skills or coping mechanisms do you have in your tool belt? What does your toolbox contain? When a client comes to you, what's in their toolbox? What's their knowledge base? And then how do we help them learn either A, how to use the tools that are in their toolbox, or B, go to the store and buy more tools for them so they have them added to their toolbox. I remember my grandfather gave me his toolbox when he was clearing out his house, and he had things in there I had no idea what the heck they were. And I'm ashamed to say it. One of them was a soldering gun. At the time when he gave it to me, I had no idea what the heck a soldering gun was. So what did he do? Did he tell me just to, okay, don't use it? No, he took his time. He said, this is how it works. He showed me how to use it. He worked on it with me. We did some projects together. And then once I felt comfortable, I was on my own. But every so often, he'd ask me, how you doing with that soldering gun? Similar concept. When you show someone how to use a new skill or a tool, you work with them, you come alongside them, and then you let them go off on their own, but you still check in every so often to see how they're doing. What are some factors to consider with sports betting expansion? As we're talking about sports betting here, there's a couple of areas that are really concerning. Illinois, you're going to see more and more of this, coming from New Jersey, the marketing and the advertisements, it's unbelievable. You can't go 2 minutes, 3 minutes without seeing a DraftKings, a FanDuel, a PointsBet, MGM, a Caesars. I mean, the marketing is unreal. I received a phone call from a guy in South Carolina one time when I was working with 800 Gambler as the assistant director. And he said, I want to file a complaint. I said, I'm sorry. How can I help you today? He says, well, I'm tired of seeing all these gambling and the odds and the lines. I'm just trying to watch the baseball game, and they keep talking about what the odds are. He goes, when can I just go back to watching baseball without any of that garbage? That's what. So he filed his complaint. I pointed him in the right direction. But the marketing is there. And so the other factors also are the funding sources. How do we pay for things and how do we fund our accounts? And also partnerships, because that's a big one that's really coming up. But let's take a deeper look at marketing first. What does marketing do? I mean, marketing motivates us to do something. You know, the Super Bowl ads are always very expensive because that's the time when you're going to have the most eyes, traditionally, historically, on one single sporting event. So the ad price increases because there'll be millions and millions of tens of millions of viewers. So it disturbs a person, it motivates a behavior. And sometimes you'll have people come away and say, that was the worst commercial. But guess what? If everyone's talking about how bad it really was, in essence, it did its job because it's now getting people to talk about this product, this concept, this idea, or this commercial. So marketing reinforces behaviors. Specific to a casino, that can be the lure of a person to come in and say, all right, I want to gamble with you. I received your comp in the mail. I have a free buffet for, in-person casino. I have a $10 free play. I have a 50% off or a free hotel room. And that can be what gets the person on the property or gambling with them. The concern is for states that are expanding their gambling, when you have a person who has identified themselves as having a gambling problem and they sign up for a voluntary self-exclusion list, the marketing has to stop. And there will be fines handed out if an operator markets to a person who has voluntarily excluded themselves from gambling activities. We've seen that happen because that'll be the thing that triggers a person to return to gambling. Time and time again, I've received phone calls when I was at 800 Gambler. Individuals said, I received a $20 free play. I've been trying to stop gambling, but it's free money. So what's the harm? The harm is you're going back now to that area that's created so much harm for you in the past. And all it takes is a little bit of a marketing piece. Marketing attracts new players. We're seeing it more than ever. And we're seeing this on college campuses. The marketing and the partnerships, which I'll talk about, they're combined. We're starting to see casino operators and sportsbook operators partnering with college campuses. We know LSU and Caesars. We know Michigan State and DraftKings, PointsBet in Colorado. There's other deals that are pending for Division 1, 2, and 3 schools all around the United States. And that's something that we have to really keep an eye on because it's that exposure, accessibility, availability. You're having more and more people opening up gambling accounts and just experimenting, trying it out. We know the numbers of people who experience disordered gambling are relatively low, percentage-wise, historically from the data that we have, and there's no federal funding for this, but from the state by state and data that we have, we know the numbers are in the low single-digit percents of gambling disorder. The issue is that over time, as we start to expose more people to opening up accounts and the availability and accessibility, gambling problems occur along a spectrum. You don't just have to be a person with a severe gambling disorder. What about the people who maybe don't quite meet that criteria, but are now moving along the spectrum, moving from no gambling at all to maybe now some social gambling, or those that were social gamblers are now able to gamble more often on their phone. So now they're moving into more of an at-risk category. We're moving people along the spectrum and not in the right direction. And that's the concern. That's why prevention has to occur, either primary, secondary, or tertiary. We have to continually reinforce the urge for caution. We need more restrictions on marketing. We need to restrict marketing like they restrict tobacco and alcohol ads. But gambling marketing is not restricted as of yet. Hopefully that will change over time. Funding sources. We're seeing more cashless and touchless since COVID. We're seeing the increasing use of credit, debit, ACH. We're seeing the use, as Jody pointed out, of crypto and alt currency, whether it's Cash App or Bitcoin apps where you can transition money, and these are either legal or illegal sites. It's easy, it's accessible, and it plays to the psychology of a person using electronic cash versus when you use physical cash. You tend to spend less money when you have physical cash in your hand. You feel it leaving your purse or your wallet. Electronically, I'll just set up a payment, let it go, and I'll worry about it next month. And traditionally, you hear people talk about that around the holiday times when they're buying their holiday gifts, maybe. They get those bills in January, and they say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, look at how much I spent, I lost track of it, right? So that's what we see. And then data and the content is an interesting emerging trend. This will be interesting to see how it plays out in the years to come. Who owns the data? Players sign agreements with the MLB has the Players Association. You have the NFL Players Association. Every sports league has a Players Association, and they are employees of the league. But the players are the ones that put the data together because they perform on the field or on the court or on the rink or on the ice, whatever it might be. There could come a point in time where the players do want a percentage back of all of the gambling revenue that's being generated. Without them, there's no lines to bet on. There's no statistics or odds. So that'll be interesting in terms of who owns the data. Are they entitled to a royalty? Are they entitled to benefits after they stop playing the game? This will be interesting how this gets folded in. The other issue is the data reliable? Data has to be reliable to have efficient gambling markets. Otherwise, you start compromising integrity of the game. And one of the areas is that speed of transmission. If I'm sitting in a stadium watching a game live, I'm seeing the play happen real time. If you're sitting at home 2,000 miles away watching it on satellite, there's going to be a delay. And that's the key. Is at one time there was thought to be an unfair gambling edge or advantage to people sitting in the arena or stadium versus those watching from far away. So how could we create lines and have an efficient market without giving someone an unfair advantage? The speed of transmission times has really closed. So it's almost essentially negligible at this point. But that is interesting to follow as we move through. So what makes sports betting so concerning? Well, there's some structural characteristics of online sports gambling that give rise to concern. And from a treatment perspective, it makes me wonder, and I'm not a clinician, but it makes me wonder, do we need to start thinking about our treatment modality and our therapeutic intervention, our conversation for those who are specifically online sports bettors versus brick and mortar, slower paced poker players? Because I go back to the video and I think about that rapid reinforcement. I'm thinking about the neurons that are firing together, that are getting wired together every 20 seconds. And I'm just wondering about, is there something to be said about what's happening, what's changing in the brain habitually that's leading to addiction? And is that rapid reinforcement from online component, technology component, versus physically sitting in a casino touching the cards? It's the physical versus the electronic and what's happening. Sometimes I often wonder, and I throw these out there, add them to the chat, if someone has a gambling addiction online, but perhaps they have an unhealthy relationship with technology in general. If we solve the technology relationship or start addressing their relationship with technology, do the other things start to improve in their life as well? So that's what's very interesting when I think about people who have an online gambling addiction. Is it the gambling or is it the online? Is it both? I don't know. It's different for each person, but I throw that out there as something to kind of think through. For today, I will say that the number one characteristic to consider for online sports betting is the in-play betting. In-play sports betting has been huge in the UK for over a decade. And it is just what it says it is. It's betting on a sporting event while it's going on. You're not just betting $100 on the Chicago Bears to beat the Cincinnati Bengals, and then 3 hours later, you're getting your outcome. No, you're betting $100 at the start of the game, and then the Bears take an early 7-0 lead, and now you could choose to, you may have had the touchdown on that play. Maybe you bet that the first touchdown of the day would be a pass. Great. Maybe you bet it would be a run and you lost. Maybe you bet $5 that the running back would run for more than 10 yards on first down. That's in-play sports betting, betting almost play-by-play or sequence by sequence. Does it have the potential to be more harmful than other forms of gambling? Potentially. In-play sports betting, that's crucial in the acquisition and maintenance, as well as the development of online gambling behaviors, because you start normalizing this experience. So now I'm going to bet in play. I'm going to be betting during the course of a game. I talked to a gentleman one time who made over 200 bets during the course of one game. He would sit at the bar drinking. So drinking and gambling. We know the connection between the two. Alcohol and gambling, about 60% of the time, people with a gambling disorder also have an alcohol use disorder and almost similarly have a nicotine dependency in some way. So we start seeing connected behaviors. So that can be crucial in acquiring. So now all of a sudden, this feeling, this participation, the anticipation, everything's going on in the brain, rapid reinforcement. And now it's maintaining the gambling addiction. Now I need to continue doing this thing. I think I have control over these bets because if I'm watching a game, I tend to think I know more about the teams. I'm a smarter bettor. I'm going to manage my money better. And now all of a sudden I have an increased chance of winning. These are all illusions of control. And it can also lead to development of online gambling behaviors. An individual no longer feels the rush or the thrill of gambling in person. It's too boring. It's too slow. So you need that speed and velocity of the transaction to continue. It's the tolerance. Think about our tolerance. That's what it comes down to. It's largely rooted in that. The $5 bet no longer does it. It now needs to be 10. Having one bet at a time no longer does it. Now it needs to be 10. It's the tolerance builds. Our bodies have tremendous ability of adaptation. And that tolerance, when it starts going, we're not going back. I always tell people in recovery rooms and when I speak, if I were to ever go back to gambling, I'm not going back to where I started when I was 12 years old with my dad betting $2 to win on a horse at a racetrack. Just like people who struggle with drugs and alcohol, they're not going back to that very first time. They're oftentimes going back to near where they left off, if not further. And that's the concern. The illusion of control in in-play sports betting. The gambler can dictate the speed of the bets, how fast they're betting, how much money they're betting, and how many they have open at any one time. There's a lot of control there. There's a lot to digest. You're immersed in that world. You dissociate, you escape, you're laser focused, you're on an adrenaline and a high the entire time. It's intense. And that is what can contribute to maintaining the gambling problem or developing a new and really dangerous online gambling addiction. The in-play wagering leads to high speed and continuous reinforcement. It's the little microbursts of dopamine. You know, when you put something on social media, a little picture, maybe a comment, maybe something funny and whimsical, and you get 100 likes, 200 likes, 80 comments. You're like, wow, that felt really good. Or the other times you put something out there and you get like one view, maybe a like, no comments. You're like, oh, that was terrible. No dopamine boost there. When people like what you're putting out there, it makes you feel good. And that's a similar thing with in-play wagering. High-speed continuous reinforcement leads to those micro boosts of dopamine. When you do get the win, it feels good, then you're on to the next one. You don't have that time component to reflect on your bets. So you're never really, it's funny because you're not really in the present when you're gambling with in-play wagering. You're thinking about your next bet, you're thinking about what you just lost, but you're not really enjoying the game. Yes, you're looking for the outcome, but you're also thinking about what are you going to do next. And so there's a constant battle going on inside the individual. It's continuous action, it's preoccupation, it's isolation, it's immersive, and it can become very dangerous. But with in-play betting, the individual then does have the ability to cash their bet out early. That's the second structural characteristic of online sports betting. So with in-play betting, as I mentioned before, you bet the start of the Chicago Bears game. They score a touchdown on the opening drive. Who knows how? They don't score many touchdowns. I'm sorry, Illinois. But it certainly wasn't the quarterback. It was probably the running back. So now you're up 7-0. So now you might say, okay, my bet is winning. Well, I don't really feel comfortable with how the rest of the game's going to go, so I'm going to close out my bet early. For many of you that have ever watched Deal or No Deal, that's my man Howie Mandel right there. That's essentially what the early cash out really is. It gives you the opportunity to close out your bet before the game is done. And what the sportsbook operator will give you, they'll give you a discounted value, right? So if you bet $100 on the Bears to win, you're going to win $90.91, okay? That's after they take out their cut. So you'll get $190 back essentially. But if the Bears open up with a touchdown, the sportsbook operator might say, okay, listen, you're winning 7-0. It's still early in the game. If you close your bet out now, we'll give you your $100 back plus $20. So we'll give you back $120. So now you just made $20 on your 100. You have a choice. You can either take the deal of 120, or you can continue to let the open bet ride. And based on what happens in the game, the operator, the sportsbook operator, will continue to adjust the number and their offer. If the Bears end up losing the game or start losing the game and giving up multiple touchdowns, they're not going to give you any offer. If the Bears start winning by more, then the offer goes up. That's deal or no deal. That's early cash out in a nutshell. Will you take the offer that's being given to you at a discounted rate, or will you continue to press your luck and let it ride? The concern, though, is that the cash out feature starts to link in-play sports gambling with almost a stock market day trading type kind of feel, because you have the ability to lock in your profits or limit your losses. And those are straight from the investment world. Another phrase that's straight from the investment world, which I think could be applied to the gambling world, is that past performance is not indicative of future results. We see that all the time in the stock market world. Past performance does not indicate future results. Same thing in the gambling world. With all the skill that a sports bettor tries to put forth, and they're trying to research and handicap, that does not indicate what's going to happen today or tomorrow. So early cash out starts changing the gambler's thinking from gambling, quote unquote, to investing. And that's one of the concerns. It comes back to marketing that I mentioned earlier. Because when we talk with college-age students, like I mentioned, I'll be at Creighton University today. I was at King University in Tennessee. We've been to Clemson. We've been to Villanova. We go all around the country working with Division I, II, and III. And these are NCAA athletes who are not allowed to gamble on sports. NCAA is very clear on that. You risk losing your eligibility and your scholarship if you have one at the Division I or II level. But when you're talking to other students, non-athletes, you might have a group of students who say sports betting is really not gambling. It's like a side job. Because if I'm losing, I'm just closing out my bet early. I'm not losing anything at the end. I was smart enough to get out of my bet while the game was going on. A gambler wouldn't be that smart. And now all of a sudden, we're starting to see this shift in thinking from the younger demographic, the 21 to 35 demographic, in the sense that I'm not like my father and my uncle who gambled. I'm a smart gambler. It's more like investing. It's a side job. I have more opportunity to close out my bet so I don't lose as much. I won't lose my shirt like they did. Comparison. That's where we're starting to see it rooted. So it changes the thinking from skill-based gambling to almost skillful money management. You can hear it in the conversation. If you're working with people who are sports bettors, ask them, tell me about your sports betting. Do you bet on the outcome of the game? Are you actively watching? Are you closing out your bets mid-game and opening up new bets? You'll get a lot of insight, because that's the way that people are starting to gamble. So as we move through here, I want to leave some time for Q&A. I do have some prevention stuff after this. Just summarizing what we've started with today. We have to really focus on the illusion of control, right? Skill versus luck. It's oftentimes thought that sports betting, poker playing is more skill because of the research and the handicapping versus just the traditional slot machine or scratch-off lottery ticket. But they're both gambling. They're still gambling. It's the intermittent reinforcement. That's the hook. That's what makes it so difficult to abandon gambling. Every so often I'm going to win. I just don't know three things. And what are they? How much, how often, or when it will occur next. But that's the hook. We're also starting to see with marketing and with, especially on the college campuses, social proofing is really at an all-time high as it pertains to sports betting. It's legal. Other people are doing it. What's the harm? And if my friends can do it, and they're not talking about having problems, then maybe I should be doing it too. But the problem is gambling addiction still carries a lot of stigma. And with stigma comes shame. And shame, as I mentioned yesterday, if no one else is talking about the addiction, some people won't feel like the first person to want to talk about it. You know, you can have a group of 10 fraternity brothers in a house, all gambling. 5 of them might be struggling with their gambling, but they're going to go along with the other 5 because they're having a fun, enjoyable time with it. So we have this problem, this big elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, but you have a certain number of people who are feeling some kind of way with their gambling activity. They just don't want to talk about it because, I want to be like them. They're not having a problem. I want to be like them. Scarcity principle, act now, act fast. We see that for comps, for deals, for marketing. Get in today, and if you sign in today and deposit $1 into your account, we'll give you $250 if a pitcher throws a strike in tonight's baseball game. It's like, come on, really? Throws a strike? Okay, that's not even a bet. That's coined as a risk-free bet. There's no gambling going on there. That's a marketing offer. That's all that is. There's no bet. Of course, a pitcher's going to throw a strike. And then the near miss, that's the hook. The near miss, when you're so close, when you're betting on something and you bet that David Montgomery for the Bears will have a 10-yard run on first down and he runs 9 yards, and you say, oh, so close. Let me do that again. When you're at the casino and you pull the handle, you see jackpot, and then the other third jackpot reel is just one off. Oh, so close. Let me do that again. That's the hook. So what do we do, right? We want to talk about prevention, and prevention can come in funny videos, and prevention can come in some serious videos too. The last video of the day I'm going to show you is out of Australia, and it's the impact of gambling on the family. A really powerful video. I get teary-eyed every time I see the video. So be ready for that as we end the day. But I'll show it to you as a powerful video, because as we talk about everything we've talked about the past 2 days, let's not lose sight of the loved ones. Please, let's not lose sight of the family members. They have to come along for the journey of recovery. They've been hurt. They've suffered loss. They've had maybe traumatic experience, financial loss. They had their safety and security stolen. And it really weighs heavy on the loved ones and family members. So we definitely have to dedicate some time for that. But for prevention, we also can see other avenues where sometimes prevention can come in a whimsical form, in a funny form. These next 3 videos are short little 30-second PSAs, and it's about avoiding bet regret. It's out of the UK. Avoid bet regret. So tap out before you place that bet. You're going to regret it if you keep going. So just stop now. So take a look at the first one as we move through.
Hurry up.
It's tap out time.
Tap out the app, Barry! Oh, you chasing losses again? That dog's got more chance of catching its tail. Think before you bet.
I've done it. I've tapped out.
This season, tap out. Take a moment. Avoid bet regret.
What I love about the first one is the fact that they highlight one of the classic telltale signs of a person with a gambling problem: chasing your losses. So avoid bet regret. Don't chase your losses. And I just think the delivery of that, we don't always have to have such serious messages. And it was so well delivered. And I just laugh every time I see that. Hey, take a look at the next one here. Again, avoiding bet regret. You'll see the same big guy come to the rescue.
It's tap out time.
Yeah! Tap out the app, Dave! Oh. Do you even know anything about Ukrainian football?
No.
Think before you bet.
I've tapped out.
This season, tap out. Take a moment. Avoid bet regret.
And they talk about Be Gamble Aware as the organization. Do you know anything about these sports in these other countries that you've never been to, you've never followed, but for the person who with a gambling problem, they just want action or escape. You'll bet on anything. And so it highlights that aspect of gambling addiction. I think they do a wonderful job of highlighting those aspects. Here's the third one, a different type of scene. And here's the third and final one of the PSA.
Ready?
Keep up!
And that's the third one. A little bit different, but still gets
Ready?
the same message across. Slow down, be educated, think about what you're doing. Gambling's a form of entertainment. As I mentioned, I'm not against gambling. I'm against gambling for me. I don't have a healthy relationship. I've tried harm reduction early on in my recovery, going back to 2010, 2011. It did not work. I don't want to try it. I've had a number of people say, well, you've been 12 years in recovery. Do you think you try harm prevention again, harm reduction again? Why would I even want to? My life has been going well for 12 years. Why do I want to fix what's not broken? And I think people start to get complacent sometimes in recovery, and they start to experiment. And the 12-step rooms are very clear. Small bet experimentation can be the thing that sends you right back to your gambling disorder. So why tempt yourself? Why? I've created a life where gambling no longer fits in, and life is good. So there's no reason to go back. So how do we, as we close out today, talking about the 3 levels of prevention and some prevention activities, and then finish with the video focusing on the family, which is very important. We try to have primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. Gambling addiction is hard with primary. As I mentioned before, a lot of our young people are exposed to gambling or are gambling at an early age. We want to get it before they gamble or move to an at-risk group. Oftentimes, most of what we do is secondary. We're trying to reduce harm through early identification of people who may be at risk. And at risk can come in many different ways and forms and shapes, which we'll take a quick look at. And then tertiary is that we really want to minimize the impact of harm through people who are already in the at-risk category. They might be in recovery from drugs, alcohol. They might be in recovery from gambling. We have to continue to go back and let them know, hey, how you doing? Check in with them, making sure that they don't return back to use, right? We don't want a person with a gambling problem to return to use. So we have to continue to have different levels of prevention. For primary, oftentimes it's thought of as youth, but let's be honest, there are people in middle age who have never gambled before. My grandparents, my grandfather served in the Coast Guard. He and my grandmother never gambled. They died when they were 93. They never gambled. They technically could have qualified as people in the primary audience. You have college students who are just getting to college for the first time, and it's primarily the females who don't experiment with gambling as early or as often as the males do. So traditionally, the male student athlete is the one that's really at risk on a college campus. And that's why it's so important with what the work that Virginia's doing is that we get to these individuals at an earlier age. Secondary, listen, at the end of the day, gambling, with the way it's expanding across the country, anyone can have access to gambling, it seems, at any time, no matter which state you're going to, whether in person, lottery, online casino, online sports betting laws, horse tracks, dog tracks. Some can argue that daily fantasy sports, which is not technically gambling in many jurisdictions, but yet can evoke the same feelings and behaviors that gambling can. So our target audience is all over. It's in the clinical setting. It's people in recovery from alcohol and substance use disorder to make sure they don't switch. People in the criminal justice or juvenile justice system. Gambling goes on almost daily within correction setting environment. Corrections officers see it as a moderate concern at best. Keeps people active, it keeps them busy, keeps everyone laying low, unless there's an argument over a gambling debt. People who are employed by the gambling operators, they're at risk. They're around odds and lines in the conversation on a daily basis. It's part of their environment. So when we do an environmental scan, they're really at risk. People who experience mental health issues, depression, anxiety, people who have family members with gambling problems, people who've experienced gambling problems themselves to some degree at an early age. And then lastly, the third is the tertiary prevention. And again, these are people who might have already had gambling issues in their life, people who are in recovery. We want to prevent return to use, people who are really in those high-risk settings. Prevention matters. So what are some prevention activities? We just came out of Problem Gambling Awareness Month. I know the use of video. We've been seeing these wonderful videos from Illinois, and we know the feeling. I think those videos are just great. I've been enjoying watching them in between the breaks. Statewide campaigns, partnerships with operators and agencies to help spread the word. Assist with policy development. Like I mentioned, in Virginia with that gambling curriculum in K through 12, that's important. What about working with college campuses in the state? Do college campuses have gambling policies on campus? And if so, what do they look like? How about corporations and EAP resources? What's the policy? What's the assistance for people with gambling problems? collaborating with the academic community, doing research, doing studies specific to a county or to a state, a prevalence study, right? Doing more of those. Education and awareness workshops, working in the high school, working in the middle school, senior centers, bingo halls, criminal justice, corrections, jails, lunch and learns at the local libraries. These are all great ideas, great strategies to help promote awareness and education. Disseminating literature, radio, TV, PSAs, op-ed pieces, podcasts, radio shows. You know, the world is out there. We have to just look and see where the opportunity exists. And in the field of gambling, it exists, it seems, as almost every turn. And the last one is sharing lived experience. I know not everyone can do that. If you've never struggled with a gambling addiction, you can't share lived experience as a person in recovery from gambling. I'm thankful that I have the privilege and opportunity to do the work that I do, because it's allowed me to come across some amazing people, be invited to amazing opportunities and present at state conferences just like this one, because I get a chance to understand and think through as I develop PowerPoints and communicate with everyone, not just things that I've read in research or things that I've read in a book or stories I've heard. These are also feelings I've experienced inside. And I can take them and turn them into words and ideas and thoughts and try to draw connections. So hopefully that adds value. Last element of the day is the video. It's about a 4-minute video, which will lead us right to the bottom of the hour, but this is powerful and I want to share this. 4-minute video for how gambling can impact a family. Hope you enjoy, and then I'll stop sharing and I'll come on for the last couple moments.
My husband has a problem with gambling. I've given up trying to fix it. It's just what our life is now. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a room and I can't get out.
My son gambles. I sometimes wonder if it's my fault. You know, was it something I did or maybe something I didn't do? It's affecting everything. Actually, I'm a bit embarrassed that it's got this bad.
My dad gambles a lot. He thinks I don't know about it, but I do. I've known something was going on for a while now. It's like I see my friends' parents and it's like a whole other world than mine. I mean, it's nothing special, it's just, I don't know, normal? I want normal.
My other kids don't say anything about it anymore. And it's not the kind of thing I discuss with friends. Well, everyone's got their own problems. I would like to think that my son could take control himself. But no, it's not that simple. And gambling's everywhere you look these days.
I used to get my hopes up that things would change. I used to think we'd wake up one day and everything would be better. But I know it's not going to happen. I've thought about talking to Mum, but it's like, if I'm okay, then she's okay. But I know she's not. She's not okay.
The gambling makes life hard, but it's the loneliness that really gets to me. I don't want to talk to anyone else about it because I don't want anyone else to know. I know that he's hurting. I don't want to have to choose, but the kids have to be my number one priority.
That one gets me every time. You know, have a conversation, talk to someone you love about, you know, gambling disorder. That one, boy, that one gets me, Liz, every time.
You know, Dan, that and your presentation was just powerful, informative, and also hopeful. So we're so grateful for you and everything that you shared today. There's been so much great conversation in the chat, and we're thrilled that everybody could participate in the summit these past 2 days. And we hope, well, we know you got a lot more. So thank you all for attending. We'll see you next year. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thanks, Liz.
Bye.